One of my audience members tried to make the case that time spent on these live service games do not equal the revenue or profits that come in. We have to test this hypothesis against the data that's available. I'm going to go ahead and read some of the highlights of the comment that, this audience member of ours shared. They said that games like, say, maybe Dota 2, which they've put in a lot of time on, they've only spent like $30 compared to much more money that they've spent on single player games. They say that the reason, basically PlayStation single player games was the reason that they won the console war. I don't think that that's the case. I think that that's one part of it, but there's also third-party money adding, getting better versions of games. I remember I was a PlayStation 4 player. I remember playing Batman Arkham Knight, and it had a scarecrow aspect to it that wasn't on the Xbox version. So PlayStation was doing these things. And then I remember Xbox also lost focus on what was important in terms of games and was not having a good time getting games from the ground. Games like Scalebound, which Platinum Games basically siphoned the money to go make Nier Automata, pretty much, and, cheated Xbox out of a game that they could have had for their own platform. And all kinds of other things were going on, and Xbox was not having a good time. So there are many factors that go into that, because now we're seeing PlayStation's real, move from these consoles that are so-called selling the live service games, and they're making the shift to moving stuff to PC. This is pretty much what we're seeing now, because this old interview with Herman Holst even highlights where he said that, it doesn't mean after bringing Horizon Zero Dawn to PC, it basically said that, look, check this out. And to maybe put a few minds at ease, releasing one first-party AAA game title to PC doesn't necessarily mean that every game will now come to PC. But we know that every game is going to PC. In fact, some are going day one. If these PlayStation games were so amazing to a lot of PlayStation players, why is PlayStation needing the PC market? Why is it going to PC with these games, seeing that PlayStation players are spending time on these other live service games? Because not only does this live service game, siphoning of player time dispute your argument, it also cuts away from the potential profits of these single player games. Let's look at the data set and let's see what it tells us. PC Gamer wrote this article last year in May of 2024. They talked about the PC games market growing a lot more than the console games market, but there was also something that was very important. They mentioned that 90% of video games in terms of playtime and revenue, was captured by 43 games. Did you hear that? 90% of new game revenue in 2023 was captured by 43 games. Which 43 games would have captured 90% of that revenue? Like, what will be the majority of those games? Oh, you can be sure that it wasn't all single-player games. You can be sure that single-player games were a small number in terms of that. It was mostly the live service games. Mostly the live service games. So look at it. They wrote it right here. They said, following the early pandemic boom, Newzoo says that gaming revenue shrank in 2021, stabilized in 22, and grew by an estimated 0.5% in 2023. Hence why the year is categorized as a recovery. The firm cautions, however, that playtime hours have dropped precipitously, which means we touch grass, and notes that 90% of new game revenue in 2023 was captured by 43 games. Every single week in 2024 that we saw that Matt Piscatella brought this data set out was live service games extravaganza. Now, what is the revenue looking like? Let's start with Diablo 4. Diablo 4 launched in June of 2023. By the time they were reporting in September of 2024, basically about 15 months later, that game had brought in $150 million of revenue in microtransactions. Now, I spoke to our audience member and I pointed this out and said, think about this particular extra $30 you spent on Dota. Think about the extra $150 million of microtransactions, which is $10 million a month. Think about a game like Elder Scrolls Online, which makes about $15 million a month every single month since its launch. And there's no way you can say that these live service games are not siphoning funds from single player games. If it wasn't, PlayStation would not be bothered to move its development budget from single player games, which used to be 88%. It would not have bothered to move it to 60% live service, 40% single player games. Y'all aren't buying the games. You're talking about the games. You're talking about the experiences, but you're the minority gamer. The majority of gamers are playing these live service games. You said this when I replied with Diablo. You said Diablo has crossed $1 billion in revenue. Only a small fraction was microtransactions, as you mentioned. That is downplaying. To say that $10 million a month in microtransactions, digital items that you and I can make on Photoshop. That's literally how they make a lot of these skins and stuff. They literally are very simple to make. In fact, if you want to even know, let me even give you some crazy history that you don't even know about. When the Division 1, after it launched and a lot of their player base had basically dried up, the developers started doing these developer streams every single week. And, you know, the core fans would tune in to those streams. And that time, you know what they were doing? They were making the Division 2. We didn't even know by then. They were just promising us new content and they were making changes to the game. But we saw the developers do things like create skins. When players in the chat were suggesting colors, oh yeah, make it green, make it. That's the first time I ever saw a skin being developed in real time. Hamish Bode is the name of the developer. Go look it up if you can find it on VODs and, you know, streams. And we saw them making it. I was like, bro, this is like cheap work. They're gonna sell this stuff for, you know, 99 cents, $2.99. And if people buy a bunch of this stuff, it's easy peasy. That's how easy it is to make a lot of these skins in terms of microtransactions. So the ROI for them are actually way insane compared to selling and making of the full-blown game. This is why these games are insane in terms of how they can pull people in. So when you compare the fact that 43 games have captured 90% of new game revenue in 2023, and we looked at the, you know, the movement of these games in 2024, there is no way anybody can come out and say these single-player games being exclusive is a healthy market, is a healthy strategy in this market. I can't see it. The data doesn't support it. Sure, like I said, you may be enjoying the single player games, but by golly, you should be happy that there are people who are whales blowing money on these live service games to fund the single player games that you enjoy. That's literally how I've come to see it. I don't blow my money on live service games. I mean, I'll spend time and play the ones that I like, but I'm not giving money for microtransactions and skins just inordinately. That's not happening. I think the last time I bought a microtransaction was Noob Saibot in Mortal Kombat 1. I didn't even buy the expansion for the MK1. I did buy the expansion for MK11. I was excited. I bought one Raiden skin. I bought RoboCop for my PC version because I didn't want to buy the full expansion. I could have just waited. Everything came on sale and basically became $2.99 and basically almost free even for the entire pack. So you said this, but Sony should stick to their strongest single-player experiences. They do that best in the industry. Well, they're one of many because other people are doing good as well, especially for cinematic game experiences. I mean, look at Alan Wake 2. If that studio had $200-300 million, man, I mean, imagine what they can do. Sony just has money to blow. Many studios can do it. It's just that many of them don't have the money to do it the way Sony does it. And Sony uses a lot of its entertainment properties to, you know, basically bring in like highest level of, you know, production into these games. If other studios has access to that in terms of money, they do it. From Software does it. I mean, they have like composers in their studios and they've understood the you know, kind of like the push behind high production, and they can bring those games to the market with ease too. They're very fast at making games. That brings people to their platform. When they earn the most of all, where they earn the most is basically 30% cut, and they gain from other platforms. And Sony's also spending 30% on other platforms as well too. I mean, you spend money to make money. If say even all $150 million of Diablo 4's microtransactions were from PlayStation, 70% still goes to the owner of the game. So again, you got to spend money to make money. So right now in today's gaming industry and in today's gaming market, PlayStation has to adjust its strategy, has to adjust the way it does things in order for it to be able to get out there and make some real cash to continue to fund its single-player games. It was Call of Duty that was funding these single-player games, man. It was literally Call of Duty, the microtransactions, and a lot of stuff that was bringing in $800 million or more every year for PlayStation that they were taking to fund these single-player games. Simple. Now, are they going to still keep funding single-player games? Of course they will. However, they want to now take that money and pivot 60% to their live service games, and 40% is going to go to their single-player games. They've switched it all up. So, sure, they may make the shiniest games in the industry, but these games are the riskiest and the most expensive games. I mean, live service is risky too. If it fails, it flops. Right? But you can cook those up, you know, and still be able to get something out of it before you close up shop. But what they want is they want to be able to replicate the success of what right now you're seeing with a lot of these other games. Tim Sweeney came out and said they're making all these games very expensive and no one is playing them. People prefer to play these games in their communities, with their friends, with people that they know. Minecraft, Overwatch 2, Apex Legends, Rocket League, you know, all these small indie games here and there, survival-based games that you're not even seeing on these lists that exist that people are playing and spending their time on with their buddies. They're not single-player games. I'm not saying that single-player games are bad. I'm just saying that the market for them is taking a hit with rising development costs, that anybody who wants to keep up has to have a better flow of revenue. And that revenue, simply from an ROI perspective, comes from the live service games. It's just that simple. Thanks for watching. And now I know, I was going to say thanks for watching, but I know, you know, when I say it, sometimes it's easy to want to lean into biases because Xbox has a bunch of those live service games. So now everybody wants to talk about 30% and all that stuff. Xbox figured out the formula and they pulled their weight behind it and bought a bunch of them and were acquiring studios and were slowly building up small ones. And then they ended up just buying the biggest ones that you could find on the market that money could buy. It's just that simple. Thanks for watching the video. Peace out.